everyone. Welcome to the Game Before the Money podcast, celebrating pro and college football history, one legend at a time. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Game Before the Money podcast, an outstanding episode coming your way with Hall of Famer Dick LeBeau. He started his NFL playing career with the Detroit Lions in 1959. He retired from playing in the early 1970s and then had a lot of NFL football ahead of him from a coaching standpoint. He covers it all in his new book, Legendary, which you can order right now on Amazon. It's on pre-order status and will have its full release in July of 2024. Dick LeBeau was defensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers, also the Cincinnati Bengals. Those defenses helped lead their teams to Super Bowls, and he's especially going to talk about the 2008 Pittsburgh Steelers defense, and some of the statistics he's going to give you will have you wondering if maybe they're one of the greatest defenses in the history of the game. He's also going to talk about his own playing career as a defensive back with the Detroit Lions, playing alongside several Hall of Famers. That Lions secondary in the early 1960s had three Hall of Famers playing: Dick LeBeau, Yale Larry, and Night Train Lane. And later, the Lions found another Hall of Famer, Lem Barney, in that secondary. This is a great interview. I'm really excited to bring it to you. A special thanks to Coach LeBeau, as well as Steve Stout and Upton Bell for helping make this interview happen. Remember to visit thegamebeforethemoney.com and also be sure to order Dick LeBeau's book, Legendary. And the full title is Legendary: The 2008 Pittsburgh Steelers Defense, the Zone Blitz, and my 6 decades in the NFL. Here is the Game Before the Money interview with Hall of Famer Dick LeBeau. Well, the first thing to chat about is you've got a new book coming out called Legendary. Could you talk about what led you to write the book and why now?
Well, the book is about the 2008 Pittsburgh Steelers defense. And, when you're busy in your season, getting ready for the next game and everything, you don't have time to reflect very much on anything other than who you're playing and who you got to stop defensively. And I've always been a big statistics guy. So every year I took a look at the top teams in every category of the defense. And I selected, from my own personal experience, key areas that I thought were critical to playing good defense. I was looking for a way to evaluate our people so I could give them realistic goals and not just pie in the sky stuff. I thought, of course, points allowed, most important, and points are directly related by the yards that you gave up. And yards per snap I thought was important to not allow big plays. I'm going over these stats here real quick. Pass yardage per game, allowed total yards, pass yards, and then per throw. I thought the better way to evaluate passing statistics, some teams throw more than others, and just how many yards per throw are you allowing? That means number of passes, gross yardage subtracted by sack yardage, and rush yards allowed per game and per carry. Percentage, again, I did a lot of percent rather than just flat out numbers because I thought it was more important to evaluate 32 teams by a per snap basis. So I did the number of sacks out of the percentage of the times that you were thrown against. And average yards per catch, again, was just a way of keeping from big plays happening. And, of course, third down defense is always critical to winning in red zone. Well, those were what I thought were the critical areas. And I also charted always interceptions, turnovers, first downs yielded, total first downs that you yield. These are, I thought, were not super critical. Quarterback rating allowed and a percentage of completion allowed.
When did you start tracking that? Was that when you were with the Bengals or the Steelers?
Oh, way back to when before I ever really started coaching. I would always, when I was playing, I watched what I thought really good defenses and looked at a lot of their video, and that time was film. And then I would get the play-by-plays and chart the whole league. And the league then puts out all this data. It's all computerized now, but those days you just had to get it and put it down and extract the averages and everything. But I charted it. I've known it ever since I was playing, but when I became a coach in the off season, I really honed in on setting goals for the people I was coaching. Which started out as defensive backs, but ended up being coordinating. And then I was looking for defensive team stats. You can get them every year, just a lot of work. So what I ended up with giving you was those 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 critical and 2, 4, 6 areas of interest. I just put them in. But I could talk to my guys about them and put them on the board, and I had stuff around the room, so we'd go over them every week and see how we were doing, whether we were doing well or not. We weren't. We were looking to get better, and if we were looking to stay where we were. So I had a pretty good platform of defensive statistical knowledge, okay? So I'm looking in the offseason in the 08 defense, and here's what comes up. Points allowed a game first. Yards allowed per game first. Yards allowed per snap first. Yards allowed per game first. Pass yards allowed per game first. Pass yards allowed per throw first. Rush yards allowed per game second. Rush yards allowed per carry first. Percentage of sacks per throw second. Average yards per catch first. Third down defense first. Red zone defense first. So they were first in every category of the 11, 9 of them, except for the 2, and they were second in those. And that was the most rare thing that I had. I just didn't remember anything close to it. And then in the areas of interest, there was 2 more seconds, a first, a fourth, and a fifth. And their worst, if you want to call it that, out of 32 teams, was 8th in total turnovers, where they registered 29. So when I got done with that statistical analysis of what we did that year, I said, somebody ought to write a book about these guys, because it was so rare. I don't think it's ever going to happen again, Michael, to be honest with you. But, it might happen, but if it does, it's going to be very rare. And when you're working in the league, you don't have time to even think about a book. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, that would make a hell of a book. And then I worked till I was 80 years old, was delayed the starting of the book. And then after a year of retirement, I thought, that book, if I'm, every year that goes by, and it was 08, and by that time, let's see, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, it was 10 years later by the time that happened, and I said, I better write this if I'm going to. Well, being in the media, you don't happen, you don't snap your finger and the book's written. So it was time consuming, a labor of love. But that's why it's coming out. It's just the first time I had a real chance to put together some guys who had background in publishing and writing. I had none, but it was a kind of a goal from that 08 season. And that's, I know, a long way around the barn to answer your question, but I don't know any other way to answer. There's an introductory section in the book about these stats and everything. So people more than anything and just see what they did. It was fantastic what they did.
I don't think people really understand that or know that, because when you talk about great historically, you talk about the Steel Curtain Steeler defense. You talk about the Doomsday defense for the Cowboys. The 2008 Steelers doesn't really get on the radar. What you just cited statistically is really impressive.
Well, that's in the book. It's in there in graphic form. So I think I've tried to find the easiest way to explain it. It's a lot easier to do it when they got the stats in front of the picture. I put in there also what our goal was 17 points a game. It's a little higher now because of the league's higher scoring, but they allowed 14, which is, that was, I played in the 60s. 59 was my first season, and we were a very good defense. I played for the Lions. Mm-hmm. You got to go way back in there to find these kind of numbers that the defense was giving up. 13.9 points a game, Michael, is nothing in the NFL. And the average total yards allowed, and that's the one. Our yardage to hold the opponent was under 300 yards. And that 2008 bunch gave up 237 yards a game, which was 70 yards per game. Well, hell, there's 16 games in there, so you can see you get up around 1,000 yards pretty quick that they were under the goal. It's amazing.
Well, that's impressive, especially in a heavy passing era, like you were in.
That's why I said the numbers that we put up in the 50s, early 60s to lead the league. Well, everybody was in Lombardi's style of play, which they ran the ball 65% of the time and threw it 35. Well, now they throw it 65 and run it 35. So, I mean, for these guys to come up with those kind of total yardage numbers, and there's another thing that's in the book also. We had preseason, the schedules just came out for the NFL this year, who's playing who, when. We had on paper, the toughest schedule of any team in the league. Our opponents had won more games. We played against more playoff teams in that particular year. So, I mean, this isn't like a bunch of stats that were piled up against lower strata teams. Our schedule that year, going into the year, was the toughest schedule to play. But we were playing so many playoff teams. So it was worth a book for sure. I think the book's going to be pretty well received. I'm excited about it.
I am too. I'm ready to put down the pre-order right away. I see they have it up on Amazon, ready for pre-order. I'm going to be ordering it for sure.
I think it's coming out July the 9th is the publishing day, I think.
I believe it's in July. Yes, absolutely. Right in time for training camp to start.
Yep, that's what they were shooting for, I guess.
Now, you've alluded to your playing career. You grew up in Ohio, outside of Columbus, and you ended up going to Ohio State under Woody Hayes. How did that come about? Were there other offers? Did you grow up an Ohio State fan?
Well, my home, I'm from London, Ohio, which is a town now of probably around 10,000. I don't know what the population is. It was 7,500 when I was a kid. I knew that. And my home was exactly 22 miles from Ohio Stadium. It's London, Ohio is between Columbus and Springfield. I grew up in the shadow of the Horseshoe, and I loved football, loved athletics. I was always playing some sport. I had some scholarship offers, and I didn't know if Ohio State was going to be one of them ever, because that's pretty much the top of the barrel, the upper stratum. But they did, and I said, well, might as well go for the top, and, it worked out good. We won the national championship my junior year. So we had great success. And it was exactly the opposite of what we were talking about in NFL offense, throwing the ball. Woody was a ground and pound guy. So it's a long time ago, Michael. Was my 55 to 59 were my years. The NCAA did not want to compete at that time with professional football. And so they had a limited substitution rule, which pretty much made it single platoon. And if you played a lot, you played both ways, offense and defense. And I think my senior year, 6 of us averaged 57 minutes a game out of a 60-minute game in college football. So it was a different game. And Woody's, I think, probably theory or philosophy of offense probably evolved from that your guys were out there for 57 minutes of a game, and they had to be in pretty good shape. So he worked us pretty hard.
Was there anything that you picked up in college from Woody Hayes that you used later in your coaching career?
I always wanted to be a coach. My high school coach had a strong influence on me. My brother was athletic, and I watched coaches all my playing career, which turned out to be 14 years in the professional and 4 in college and 4 in high school. So I had a long time to watch, but I would just try to see how different people taught and reacted in different situations. And I would always say, I don't know if I'd do that or not that way. Or I'd say, I think that was good. It resonated with me. I was fortunate enough to be exposed to Woody. Don Shula was his first coordinating job in the NFL was with the Detroit Lions. Lombardi, George Allen, those guys coached me in the All-Star game in the Pro Bowl. And I was around those types of people, and I noticed that they all seemed to have different mannerisms and different styles, but mostly to me it looked like they were just being themselves. And that was what I thought was the best way to present your program as a coach, to just be yourself. And each one of those people that I mentioned were outstanding in their room presence. They had a lot of attention from the players, I noticed. I'm not putting myself in that category in any way, shape, or form. Whatever those guys would have chosen to be, Michael, they would have been totally successful in life. They just were magnetic with their personality. But I thought the key lesson for me, I mean, let's face it, as we mature and evolve into our personalities, it is what it is. Some are magnetic and some aren't. And most of us aren't. But the ones that are become movie stars and presidents and things of that nature. But I thought the most important lesson from watching those guys was be yourself and don't try to be somebody else. And that's what I carried away from all of those people, and probably learned as much as what I did not like and what I would never do as I did from that's a good way to do it. So that's kind of an evolved answer to your question, but I learned from each and every one of those men.
Well, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. And you mentioned Coach Shula. He comes in to Detroit your second year as a defensive backs coach, and you also have Night Train Lane come in as a teammate in 1960. Do you remember training camp in 1960 when they came in? What were some first impressions you had?
We traded for Night Train in the preseason. We were playing preseason game. Used to play 6 preseason games. The squad numbers then were 31. I think there's maybe 53 dressed now, or 48 dressed, and 53 are active on the roster. And then they have a development squad within the pros now. But there were only 31 men on a team when I came into the league. And there were a total of 5 defensive backs on each team, of which there were only 12 teams. So there were roughly 60 guys in America playing defensive back in the NFL. So believe me, all you were ever worried about was making the team and being able to stick in it with a roster that limited. We didn't have to worry about special teams, Michael. There weren't enough guys to have just a special teams unit. If you played defense, you played special teams, and that was the way it was. So when Night Train, all I was saying, that's another really good corner that I got to figure out somehow to compete with him and get a spot, because everybody pretty much only carried 3 corners at that time. Because of the limited numbers, there weren't a lot of 3 wide receiver formations. They came in as the roster numbers expanded. So it was a different game. But Night Train I just studied him a lot. He was already an established all-pro player. And I watched, like I've already told you, I watched film all the time. I watched everybody in the league I thought could play. And I thought if I tried what I saw they were doing. And if it worked for me, I put it in my game. If it didn't work for me, I didn't. Again, just going to be myself, but didn't keep you from learning new techniques. And sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't. Different guys played different styles. It was a big plus to be able to go on the practice field every day with Night Train. And we'd stay after practice and do some coverage stuff with wide receivers where I could really get some hands-on one-on-one. I did that with anybody I thought could play.
You also played with Yale Larry. There's 3 Hall of Famers in the same secondary. Yeah,
and then when Night Train retired, we drafted Lynn Barney. He's in the Hall of Fame too. So we had an unusual run right there in that secondary. Night Train was the biggest, probably fastest guy. If he was playing today, he would be completely dominant because they throw so much. He was tremendously skilled. Lim, of course, piled his numbers up because of his total athleticism. He was as quick and fast as anyone I've ever seen. Yale Larry had spent some time in the service, had his career interrupted, I think, about 2-year stint. And then he was also elected to the Texas House of Representatives. And he was a state, he might have been a senator even. I think he was a senator for several terms. Yale's one of my favorite people that I ever met. But he was a safety, and we worked together a lot. But he was on safety on my side of the field, and we would get together and plan our game stuff, which later on taught a lot of it to a guy by the name of Palomalu and Ryan Clark, and they worked together as good as any 2 safeties I've ever seen. But that all really go back to Yale Larry with a lot of that stuff. The game doesn't change that much. Angles, things of that nature.
Fundamentals, too.
Fundamentals will never change in that regard. They may do it faster and quicker, but they still got to do the same things. That's a good point, Michael.
And you brought up Troy Polamalu. He was playing strong safety for you, I believe. And your first stint with the Steelers, you had Carnell Lake, another exceptional strong safety. Can you kind of talk about, and you had Rod Woodson at that time too. Can you kind of talk about what made those guys special and how you used them, and maybe did you use Polamalu differently than Carnell Lake, or?
Oh yeah, totally. But my first coaching stint with Pittsburgh, I had 2 of my starting 4 DBs were Rod Woodson and Carnell Lake, and they're 2 of the very best defensive backs that ever played. Carnell Lake was such an outstanding athlete. He played for UCLA, and they were playing what they called the bear defense there, where a defensive guy put on the tight end and took the tight end man-to-man every snap. And I had to be able to, hold up against the run with the guy. And that was where Carnell played in his college career. So people were having trouble figuring out exactly where to play him. They figured he was safety size, but he played like a linebacker in college. And he had the ability to play deep and make plays at the line of scrimmage. He was very, very unusual. Well, one year we got hit with a bunch of injuries in the secondary, and Rod was one of them. Rod tore a ligament in his knee. It was early in the year, first game of the year, and we needed the depth there, and we put Carnell Lake from safety to corner. Now, I don't know if I've seen 2 or 3 guys ever in my coaching career, which I coached for 45 years, that could do that. Troy's one. But Lake was made all-pro at safety, and then the year that he played a corner, he made all-pro again playing corner. So that is unheard of. And that's how good he was. And Woodson was probably the best corner that's ever played in the NFL. He was not only a great defender, but he was a tremendous kick returner and interception returner. The closest thing that I've ever seen to him was Lem Barney. And Lem was also a great returner with the punts and the kickoffs. And here I got 2 guys like that in the same backfield. Well, they made me a pretty good coach, believe me. So later on, Troy, I got him in his second year in the NFL. They had traded up to take him in the first round. But I had seen him play in college and going to his workout out there. And I knew that he was tremendously gifted, and some of the things that we do on defense with pressure and using the safeties in different directions fit him perfectly. He's one of the guys, there have been a few, that I think probably Troy is the most distinctive. You could create almost anything you wanted to, and he could do it, in case the door was open. What if we did this or did that? And then you had a guy that could play the slot corner. He could play outside, but he was so instinctive and quick inside. He could get to the ball all the time. All you had to do was get him around the ball, and he was going to finish the play. So those were 3 of the many, many great defenders that I got to coach. But we got started on that by you asking about.
Yeah, and those are all exceptional players. And you're talking about Troy Polamalu's ball instincts. A lot of times you'll hear somebody's got a nose for the football. It was like Polamalu was like another level above. Sometimes it seemed like there were almost 3 of him on the field.
Yeah. Well, he's like inhuman, on the sideline, sometimes he would go from point A to point B, where you would say, how the hell could anybody do that fast, But he had the ability to study film, which he and Ryan Clark did constantly, and then transfer that immediately into action on the football field. He could see what he saw in that film, and boom, he could react right now and get right there.
Yeah, you've talked about film a couple of times. Can you talk about the importance of that a little bit? And then I'm sure you did with the Lions too. I'm sure Joe Schmidt. I wanted to talk about him a little bit. I'm sure he was a film guy too.
Joe Schmidt was a great leader. There's not too many people left that got to see him play, but those of us who did know how good he was. He was unbelievably great. Unusual situation I had with him. He and I were teammates 5 or 6 years, and then he became my coach for 5 years. So, there were skeletons in both of those closets. I told him when it was first announced, he had been an assistant coach the year before, and I went into his office. I said, Coach, I love you, I do. And I said, we've played a lot of games together. I said, but I'm never, ever coming into your office again as long as you're my head coach. I said it's going to be a better situation for both of us. But it was totally unique. But Joe was, as a player, was as unusual a player as I've ever seen. The ability to get to the ball. I think about the closest guy that I got to work with on a daily basis was James Ferrier, who was our middle linebacker on that 2008 team, and he was our. We called the signals into him, and he was the voice in the huddle that the whole team, the whole defense heard, and he was our leader.
Who were some of the unsung heroes on that defense?
This is not unsung, but James Harrison, he was leading the league in sacks all year. That year, Harrison, I think, was the defensive most valuable player in the league. Troy won it a couple of years later. But I think with 4 games to play, Harrison pretty near had that title sewed up with what he'd done, tackle-wise, fumble-wise, interception-wise. And then that was the year that he ran that interception back in the Super Bowl.
100-yard interception return, probably the biggest play of the game. It happened at the end of halftime. And in retrospect, people remember San Antonio Holmes' catch at the end of the game, but what really turned out to be hugely important was Harrison's interception.
Yeah, the thing on that play, I would say that it's the greatest defensive play I've ever seen. It's one of the greatest football plays I've ever seen, but definitely the best defensive play I've ever seen. And in the way the game ended, you got to say, being won it for us, with that unbelievable drive at the end of that game. But to get us to the point total that we never got there without that play by Harrison. I was just hoping to get us off the field with a tie game, which was, they would have had to kick a field goal down there instead of score. They were on it 2, I think, somewhere like that. Anyhow, that's, to me, is the greatest defensive play in football that I've ever seen.
Wow, that's remarkable. In over 60 years of being involved in the game, that's a remarkable statement. And it's kind of an overlooked play because of Santonio Holmes' great catch. Did you say anything to Harrison in the locker room at halftime about that play or afterwards?
No, well, everybody knew it was a great play. But the half times in the Super Bowl are really long. They're much longer than the regular game. And I think it was a good thing. See, James is, he's not real tall, but he's a big guy. And he's a huge trainer. And that run, if you remember, he just collapsed in the end zone at the end of it. It was 2 yards in the end zone when he intercepted. I think they gave him 98 yards or something on the interception return. But the way he wove and changed direction, he had to run 150 yards, 160 yards on that damn run, and it was hot. And I don't know too many linebackers that could have recovered from that. And then in the second half, he played as good or better than he did in the first half. But our boys have been very, very thankful that he was a very strict condition guy. And he was maybe the best conditioned guy on the team. But we gave the players some time to just sit and relax at halftime because it was so long. And then we started into game comments that we had to put us back on the same time pattern as a regular football game where they could carry that information that we gave them at halftime back out onto the field. So I had more time to get my notes and comments together. Everybody knew it was a special play, but there was still a hell of a lot of football left to be played. So didn't want to spend too much time congratulating anybody till you won the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's great. And that's a good segue going into, your time with the Bengals. You're in 2 Super Bowls with the Bengals and probably the most famous game, Super Bowl 23 in Montana, with that comeback on the last drive. How much did the experience in that game, did that help you in holding that lead against the Cardinals after Fitzgerald had scored a couple of touchdowns, and then after Holmes scored, there was still a little bit of time for the Cardinals to score?
Well, it was when Ben scored, I think there was about a minute left, maybe. I don't know. Let me see. I can find that out really quick. Ross, there's 2 minutes left in the game. So there was plenty of time for it to happen, but they needed a touchdown. That made the score 27-23 when Ben hit Holmes. Mm-hmm. And so we knew we had the goal line to defend. The field goal wasn't going to help them, but their quarterback was fantastic. And he'd won Super Bowls. So you knew that it wasn't over. Kurt Warner could, you remember the best show on grass and all that stuff?
Yeah, with the Rams. Yeah,
they were something else. So I think he hit the first 2 plays of that drive. And in the third play, they were both first downs, and they had gotten up to across midfield. They were near midfield, but into our territory. And Woodley got a good pass rush and stripped the ball with a sack. And Kiesel recovered it. And up until that time, I was just getting ready for the next snap because anything could happen in the NFL and often does. So it wasn't over till Brett walked off that field with that football under his arm, and I said, well, I think we're in pretty good shape here.
Yeah, I mean, that really was one of the most exciting Super Bowls that I can personally remember, and I think it is for most people too. Now, when you were with the Bengals, you played the 49ers twice in Super Bowls, and you were the defensive coordinator in the 88 season. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk to you. Tim Crumry was injured really early in that game, if I remember right. It might have been first quarter, but I'm pretty sure it was in the first half.
It was the first quarter.
It was the first quarter. Yeah. Yeah. And he was a major part of that defense on the line. What kind of adjustments did you have to make, and how much of an effect did that have on your overall game plan?
Well, my biggest thought on that was always that Tim was such an outstanding playmaker that he would have made a difference in that game. The game was a 3-point game, I think. But I didn't change anything. He was a nose tackle. His backup was Jerry Borarsky, and he was a good player. And you can't adjust, I suppose, with a quarterback. You have to adjust a little bit what your play selection is. But defensively, you have to trust in your backup guys, and that's why they're so important on a football team. Invariably, you're going to have injuries, and they ain't going to play every game 60 minutes. It just doesn't happen at any level of football. But the thing that I remember about that game, the 49ers were excellent. We could have won both of those games against them, and that's the way Super Bowls are, Michael. It's 2 good teams, and they fighting it out. Usually, it could go either way. Every now and then, there's a comfortable margin of victory, but it's very, very rare. At 3, I think the score was 3-3 at half. And I felt good about what we had done with that offense in the first half. And we had Sanford Jennings returned a kickoff in the fourth quarter there after the 49ers had scored to go ahead. And it put us ahead of them. It was in the fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't have the stats on that game, but in front of me, I don't remember the score exactly, but it was a close game right down to the wire. But I know that Montana won it with that last drive. And during that drive, we got them with a holding penalty. And they had 2nd and 20, I think. and he got out from under that with a pass. Then that pass, our guys was pretty well played by us, really, but we ran into each other and knocked them down, and Rice came out with the ball and out the other side, and we got him down on about the 12-yard line. But that's how they got the ball down there. I remember that play. And that's the play that I think of more than anything as a coach. You know, you think, what the hell could have done better? And that was a long time getting over that one, but you eventually do, because you got to go on. But both of the San Francisco Super Bowl games were very close. But I do remember that particular play. It was, I think, 2nd down and 18. And they were still around their 38-yard line, maybe 35, something like that. And that got them out of that hole, because we had a good chance right there to win the game.
I would like to ask you kind of, this isn't a greatest of all time kind of question, but just kind of, having played against Bart Starr and Johnny Unitas, and then having coached against Montana and Aikman in the Super Bowls, and then big games against Tom Brady. I mean, is there anything that you notice in common that these quarterbacks who win so many championships have, or is there anything that stands out about them?
Yeah, I wouldn't leave Peyton Manning out of that list either.
Okay.
He might be the number one in my list. I mean, in terms of accomplishments, it's got to be Brady, what he's done. But Peyton, he did so much at the line of scrimmage. He was amazing. And he had you talk about studying film. If you showed him something, man, you were dead, because he was going to take advantage of it. But yes, there is something very much in common with all those guys you named. All of them great performers and great competitors, but they're winners. Every one of those men are winners. We didn't mention Kurt Warner, or maybe he didn't play long enough, but his story is totally unique, how he got into professional football.
Absolutely.
The star that he became. But in that game that we're talking about, that Harrison scored and Ben scored, and all those great plays, in like 2 plays, he hit the receiver down the damn middle. And you can't, have a bad set against him, or he's going to put points on the board. And I thought, not thought, because you ain't got time to think too much about it, worry about it, because you got to get ready for the next series and the next play. But here we had this unbelievable season, Michael, defensively, and all the things this whole book is about. And here's one play in the 4th quarter, and the receiver, it was only about a 7 or 8 yard pass, and he ran it about 60 yards right through the middle of the field. And definitely the worst play that we had all year defensively. I thought, well, this is not the way we want this year to end, because I was, by that time, of course, aware of what they'd done statistically. So they could have ended the book right there.
Is there anything else important to add about the book?
They say there's one book in all of us, so this is mine.
All right. Well, I definitely look forward to reading it, and I really appreciate you taking the time, and hope to get a chance to chat with you again sometime.
Look forward to that, Michael, and thank you for paying attention to an old coach and a new book.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Game Before the Money podcast. Remember to order Dick LeBeau's book, Legendary. It's now available on Amazon. Also remember to visit thegamebeforethemoney.com. The Game Before the Money Oral History Foundation is a registered 501c3 nonprofit. You can donate via PayPal to help keep the website and podcast going by visiting thegamebeforethemoney.com. Transcriptions of some podcast episodes are located on thegamebeforethemoney.com and are powered by our transcription partner, Sonix. SONIX. Visit sonix.ai to learn more about their automated transcription services.